Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Chris Spurvey joining us. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. I'm really looking forward to this. This is going to be a real treat.
Chris, let's just start off. For those who don't know you, explain what you do.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Chris Spurvey, as you mentioned. I live in Newfoundland, Canada, on the east coast of Canada. My main claim to fame, I guess, is I published a book in 2015 called It's Time to Sell, Cultivating the Sales Mindset. And the impetus of that book way back then was I noticed that consultants and independent entrepreneurs really struggled to sell themselves. And as you peel back the layer of the onion, it was a mindset that was grounded in. So I went to work and said, I'm going to tackle this problem. At the time, I was with KPMG, leading business development / sales for KPMG Canada, and just started working with consultants across the country in an effort to grow their sales skills and mindset and so on. And that ultimately led to what I'm doing today, which is I'm an independent consultant working with consulting boutique-size organizations, growing out sales capacity and mindset.
Awesome. There's a lot in there that I want to unpack and kind of dive into. Before you got into working in business development for KPMG, what were you doing?
Yeah, well, I was one of the original leaders of a boutique IT consulting company, and I was chartered with finding new business for the consultants. We had, at the time, say 15 consultants when I first joined the organization. Yeah, so that was my job, go out as a leader of sales and truly sell the services of the company. And I figured there had to be a better way, essentially. And we ended up exploding the company to over 70. And that's when we got acquired. We decided to sell the company to KPMG. But certainly the path I brought that organization down was to not just have me selling the consultants, to have each of the consultants engaged in the sales process themselves and growing out their own networks and goodwill and so on. And that's what ultimately created the success of Plato Consulting.
So what did things look like when you started at that firm? Like, was it just very easy? You came into the role of growing sales and things just took off like right away? Or were there some challenges early on in terms of figuring out how do we actually grow this thing?
Yeah, no, there was a ton of challenges. So when they first hired me, when I say they, I eventually became a part owner in the company. But when I say they, there was a belief that you needed to be a salesperson, a traditional salesperson out there banging on doors and doing all the things that traditional salespeople do. That was the belief that they needed to hire somebody who was effective at that. Mm-hmm. And when I approached the company with this new idea that I thought I had, which was, you know what, yes, you need somebody leading, guiding, strategizing around sales, but let's really tap into the efforts of all the consultants. They really bought into that idea. So I went into the company and began implementing that. I mean, I can't say it was an overnight success. We definitely started to see immediate dividends simply because immediately we began to tap into the networks of each of the individual consultants, and we became more deliberate and focused and proactive around delivering the value proposition of the company. And so there was some immediate returns, I will be honest with you, but it did take a little bit of time and effort and focus. Certainly, it took really a couple of years to get it going full steam and where we started to see some significant growth.
So for everyone listening to this and also those who may be reading the transcript later on, I need to dig into this further because everything you share there sounds exciting. I can see people kind of lighting up with this idea of, okay, there's a difference between what he was doing before and then what he was doing later, getting the consultants more involved. But let's get really specific. What did it look like before? So when you came into Plato Consulting at the beginning, they hired you, so they were kind of doing the typical approach. What did that look like? Just paint a picture of maybe what kind of like a day or a week in the life of consultant or the sales function of that consulting firm.
Yeah, well, the sales function was owned and led and conducted by the CEO of the company.
Okay. And what were they doing?
What was the CEO doing? That out there networking, going out and creating relationships, finding problems to solve, and selling the solution himself, right?
Okay.
He was out there doing it on his own and obviously running up against a major issue in that there's only so much time. And when you're working in the business versus on the business, you struggle with that, right? So the idea initially was hire a salesperson who could go out and sort of pick up those tasks. That's what he was doing. He was truly selling, and the company was hitting a growth ceiling simply because there was only so much time in the day.
And so, Chris, was the approach and the strategy, the tactics that the CEO was implementing at that time, were they effective?
They were effective because he was cut from a cloth that is relationship-based and nurturing and so on. However, you can only manage a network of a certain size on your own.
Right.
And there was no real tapping into the efforts of all the other people that were employed there.
Got it. So just to be clear, so the actions that he was taking on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to generate sales were working. He was focusing on, and correct me if I'm wrong, or just jump in, he was focusing on meeting with people who could become clients, building relationships, looking to add value, talking about how the firm can help. And that was leading to business, correct?
Absolutely. Yes, it was definitely leading to business. I mean, the company had grown significantly in the United States, in Ottawa, Canada, and so on. So it was being successful.
Right.
How do we become more successful?
Right. Okay. So hit that plateau because there's just only so much time in a day. One person can only do so much. So the idea was, okay, let's bring on a salesperson, which was you. But it sounds like your approach and recommendation wasn't just, okay, let me replace you or add on to you. Let's actually get other consultants that we have in the firm to be a part of our sales engine. Is that correct?
You nailed it. Absolutely.
All right, so talk to us like just as specific as you can, maybe some specific steps that you and the other members of the team took to grow sales. Like what happened at that point?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I began a very deliberate approach to meeting with these consultants as a group, selling them on the idea of them having more rewarding careers and futures as a result of growing networks and bringing solutions. So reframing sales from a traditional point of view, used car salesman, for lack of a better word, into bringing solutions to the market. So reframing was certainly a task out of the gate. The second task out of the gate was let's get more deliberate around finding circles of influences within the market, places to create relationships and that trusted advisor type relationships and so on. Became more deliberate around that and started to hold each other a bit more accountable around that. So that ultimately then led to a whole transition or a whole change within the mindset of the company. We became a growth company, right? We really, as a company, wanted to grow, and all the consultants became incentivized to grow that, right?
I want to dig even deeper into this. So I understand you kind of rallied the troops. You had a whole conversation or several conversations around shifting the mindset from one where sales is a bad and uncomfortable thing and a pushy thing, kind of like the traditional view that a lot of people have, to one of maybe more of service and support and creating relationships and value. So that part I think is clear to probably everyone listening to this. But when you say kind of you went out then or you helped them to find centers of influence, like what actually happened? What did, let's just say, the best performing consultants do to bring in new business for the firm?
Yeah, well, I mean, they began joining organizations, joining boards of directors, began putting themselves out there in a more deliberate way, began to grow their own personal brands, such as reaching out to publications and authoring articles. So these things began to bubble up, whereby Plato Consulting became known as experts. The brand of Plato became known as an expert in the areas of security consulting and different variations, SharePoint within Microsoft Stack and so on.
Right.
I don't want to get too technical. We began to grow the individual personal brands of the consultants, and the positive byproduct of that became the Plato brand became very entrenched within certain aspects of IT consulting. We began to grow the personal brands of each individual.
Right. So it sounds like the brand and kind of the authority building strategies and focus shifted from just the CEO to other people within the organization. And there's a multiplier effect, right? There's just a lot more people having a lot more conversations, a lot more awareness, a lot more attention. Did the compensation model for the consultants change?
Not initially, but we decided as we moved along to create more of a tiered approach. I mean, project teams made up of project managers who are more senior individuals, and then analysts underneath the project manager and so on. So we did add more rigor to the compensation plan, which would reward the more senior people who create larger circles of influence and bring in new business into the company, right?
Did you find that even without changing the compensation model, that people were being more active, they were building the authority of the brand, and additional revenue was coming in as a result of that?
Absolutely. And that was a cultural shift, just as the leaders of the company began to work with the consultants and they began to buy into the future of the company. So it became a bit of a rallying cry. We became the growth IT consulting company, and just this motto, this culture of we're going to go out there and we're going to find more work and find more solutions and problems to solve and so on. And just we became a tribe effectively.
So let's now move to your time at KPMG. My understanding is, so you're the VP of Business Development for KPMG in Atlanta, Canada. Is that correct?
Oh, I was. Last summer in 2017, I resigned my role, and today I'm doing what I do full time.
During that time at KPMG, which is now a much larger sized firm, right? Kind of known globally in the consulting and finance, so forth space.
Yep.
Was the approach to business development there that you were tasked with, like that was your real role? Were the strategies that you were using for sales and business development the same as you were using at Plato?
Well, it's interesting because, yes, KPMG is certainly, unlike any of the other big four consulting firms, they're seen as being far more robust, and they would have all of this stuff in terms of methodologies and approaches. And certainly they had all that. But what I would say is I saw it wasn't overly effective. So
what wasn't effective? So just if we can better understand, like what strategies or maybe tactics were they using that you found not to be effective?
Well, in terms of strategies and tactics, I won't say they weren't effective. But what I will say is, like any consulting environments, I find subject matter experts have a tendency to go out, land a new client, and very much focus on the delivery of that client and forget that the effort they're putting in today from a business development perspective is going to be what they end up harvesting in 6, 7, 8 months' time. So what I was noticing is these cycles of up and down and then lack of growth versus if we just maintain some degree of consistency in getting out there in the market and sharing what we do can lead to a very consistent revenue growth for our company. So that's what I was noticing within KPMG. And I'll say we partnered with other companies when we were Plato, Deloitte, for example, and the same thing, right? It's just this inconsistent approach throughout the organization in growing business.
What's interesting about that is that impacts or affects the largest companies in the space, but it also impacts, and it's the same issue for independent individual solo consultants. Right. So whether it's like you're one person or you're 1,000 or 10,000 people, the same issue is present. So what have you found as the best way to overcome that? Because I think we've established that it doesn't matter what size organization you are, this can be a big issue. What have you found as the best way, or a hack or a tip or a trick or a mindset that is most beneficial to really help people and get over what's holding them back? Like to really break through that inconsistency they're having to create more consistency.
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, so let's put mindset aside. Let's assume everyone listening is ready to get out there and start to build and grow their businesses. So you mentioned the word consistency. What I find business development within non-sales sellers, people who don't have sales in their title, if they're not deliberately putting in their calendar business development time, then business development becomes the first thing that falls off the radar. So what I would encourage anyone listening to do is and I'll just use Monday morning as the time, but Monday morning, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, put it in your calendar as your business development time. And what you do during that time is you plan out what you're going to do from a business development perspective in the upcoming week. And I'm not talking about the week you're currently in. I'm talking about the upcoming week. So you want 5 meetings, make sure. If you want 3 meetings, make sure you plan 5 meetings, realizing 2 are going to fall off and they get canceled or shifted out. In that Monday morning, 8 to 10 o'clock, plan your upcoming business development for the week upcoming. The next Monday, plan out the next week, and then go ahead and start executing on what you plan to do in the previous Monday. And if you consistently do that, you'll always have new opportunities, fresh problems to solve. So it's really just about consistent scheduling of business development, proactive time.
So let's say someone now says they get that Monday, 8 to 10 a.m., they're going to work on developing their business. They're going to work on getting meetings. What have you found as the most effective way in your own experience, while you're at Plato, KPMG, even now in your own firm, to get meetings? That's an area that a lot of consultants have a challenge with, right? Is actually getting in front of their ideal clients and being able to set a conversation with them. What's kind of the best practice that you found or the best steps that someone can take to set up meetings?
Yeah, well, and this is something I think we can all play in our heads as something that is a stumbling block. Personally, I am a fan of just doing whatever it takes fundamentally and really reaching out, setting up a conversation where you indicate to the individual, whether over email or over phone, in the market, you're looking to have a conversation with XYZ to talk about what it is you do and learn more about what they do and figure out if there's any problems that we can solve or help you solve. I don't find spending a lot of time complicating it in our own heads. We just got to get out there and do the pitch however it feels good for us. It is to some degree a numbers game, right? So make sure that if you're low, if your percentages are low, you just got to throw the line a few more times to catch the right fish. And you'll learn from what's working, right? So just do more of what's working and do less of what's not working effectively.
So let's bring mindset back into this for a moment, because a lot of people, or some people, might hear that and go, well, I'm just not comfortable with talking about myself or reaching out to someone that I don't really know and making a cold call or sending a cold email and going right to that. Like, isn't there something that I should do first? Shouldn't I provide more value first? Or shouldn't I try and just focus on the relationship or whatever it might be? So what would you say to someone who understands what you're saying, but really finds it challenging to take that step to be very direct about, hey, like, I'd like to meet with you, talk about what you're doing and what we're doing here, and see if there might be a fit?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to work on the relationship, right? I use an acronym FORM, family, occupation, recreation, and motivation. So basically, I'll follow that acronym in a way that I'll ask questions of the person I'm talking to try to get to know them a little bit, find uncommon commonalities. Whether it's for me, I'm a snowmobiler, and finding out the individual is interested in certain things that I'm interested in, playing tennis and so on. I've just observed the people I work with and myself. When I'm talking to somebody, it's very easy usually to find some form of commonality that creates energy in the conversation. And from there, what I'll say to you is a lot of my meetings are typically ones that I generate through being out there in the market, doing a little bit of networking, right? So I will get out there and meet people in networking environments and find commonalities, find reasons to have coffees and so on. So it's just consistency in those networking opportunities. I very rarely do true cold calls, but now with that said, I'll use LinkedIn and find people I want to talk to and just find commonalities maybe in their LinkedIn profiles and send notes over LinkedIn, or find people who introduce me to certain people I want to get to know. that's most of the way I suggest we build businesses, getting out there and finding ways to meet people in their natural environments, right? So cold calling, while it can be done, probably a bit more of an archaic method of building a business.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. So you're saying meeting with ideal clients through networking, right? Going to events or whatever it might be. So what does that look like for you specifically? Like what type of events are you going to, or what are you looking for? What is the criteria that you use? How do you suggest that people apply that? Because just saying like going to networking events, right? Obviously you understand what that means to you, but for someone listening and saying, well, I don't want to go to events and waste my time, but I do like the idea of being able to have a more natural conversation where I don't have to cold call. What are maybe some steps that I can implement in my own business?
Events such as Board of Trade events and Chambers of Commerce events, those types of things are really low-hanging fruit, things to do just because they're great opportunities. And I think many of us have it set up in our heads that they're a waste of time, but it's really our approach to them and our mindsets around them. Every opportunity to meet, I always say we're one conversation away from a breakthrough. So really just open yourself up to meeting new people. And so getting out and doing those things. But there's also all kinds of other opportunities. You're at a hockey game, you're sitting next to an individual and you're just having a conversation. You're figuring out if there's a mutual thing in common and then taking that conversation and going one-on-one with it. When you asked me that question, I was visualizing myself just yesterday at a coffee shop talking to an individual. The president of a company came over who knew the guy I was talking to. And the guy came over, they shook hands, they said, great to see you again. And then my friend Steve looked at me and said, Steve, do you know John? And I got to meet John and we shook hands and he gave me a business card and I gave him my business card and followed up with an email when I got home. And he's the president of a scientific organization here in St. John's, Newfoundland. So I guess what I would say is you just always be wanting to put yourself in front of opportunities to meet people and be curious and looking for ways to move from beyond that very superficial idea phase into having a more deeper conversation. And so those opportunities are everywhere. You just got to be opening up your eyes for them.
You live in a city, if I'm correct, the population is 24,000 people.
Yeah, you're right. I live in a city called Mount Pearl, Newfoundland, which is, like you said, 25,000, but we're attached to a bigger city, St. John's, Newfoundland, which has about 100,000.
Okay. So still maybe small for some people, maybe large for others. But at times people look at the size of their city and feel that maybe that's going to be a disadvantage, or other times could be an advantage for them. Here, you've built your business in a pretty small city to most people's standards. Have you found being in that type of environment as a disadvantage or an advantage, or like how have you approached, like, is there any impact at all on your business, I guess?
Yeah, none at all. What I'll say is I actually made a very purposeful decision back in 2015 when I caught a vision for what I could be doing with this. I decided I wasn't going to purposely focus on my home city. And so what I decided to do was build my brand, which started with writing my book and starting my podcast, putting myself out there as, I hate the word expert, but that's what I'll use. And just like a person who wants to share their experiences with others. I just put myself out to more of a global audience by leveraging LinkedIn and so on. And lo and behold, when I did that, I found my hometown woke up and was curious about who this Chris Spurvey guy was. And when I decided to quit my job back in the middle of last summer, 2017, moving forward was actually pretty easy. I don't know. It's like by not focusing on it, I'm not perceived as begging anybody. And the people who want to talk to me, they reach out to me and we go for coffees. And it's kind of taken off from there, right? I don't know if that answers your question. Hopefully it gives you a bit of an answer.
No, it does. Like I've seen this. I know a lot of people have that concern around just, people typically look like the grass is always greener. If they're in a small town, they think that's a disadvantage. If they're in a big town, so that there's so much competition. If they're young, it's I don't have enough experience. If they're old, it's I'm too old. So there's always, right, the grass is like greener somewhere else.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm glad that you've shared that. I guess the other question I have for you here, Chris, is through everything that you've been doing, this transition from working like with Plato, then at KPMG, now through your own consulting business, working with leaders and teams, what has been maybe the biggest challenge that you've faced in the last year or so within your business that has taught you a lesson or opened your eyes up to an opportunity that maybe you didn't see before?
Yeah, great question. It's actually, the problem is near and dear to me right now. I found it actually very easy, and I use that word sparingly, but easy to go out and find a bunch of clients. Today, I have 17 organizations who look at me as their sales strategist, trusted advisor, and so on. But I'll be frank, that's all great, and I'm doing extremely well in many regards, but time has become a real factor for me. So I've hit the ceiling from a time perspective. If I look back to the summer of 17 when I made this transition, my vision was that I was going to leverage some tools in the back end so I wouldn't have to be always delivering, if that makes sense. So an online learning management approach. I'm in the process of getting myself reacquainted with that and moving forward with that. What I would say, perhaps if to anyone listening, is when you make these jumps, I had a person who gave me some advice who said, go broad what you're offering when you first jump out like this, because it'll give you an opportunity to really fine tune what you truly love to do. So I took his advice and I did that. And I now know what I like and what I don't like, and finding a bit more opportunities, multiplier opportunities to spread myself out over more business, if that makes sense.
Got it. So you're looking now at how to leverage your time more efficiently, more effectively, how to be able to continue growing because you're kind of at capacity right now.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah, good problem to have, right? And the nice thing is that there's always solutions, right? When you look at it, and it sounds like you're already looking into some of them around like LMS type of learning management system, or ideas maybe around productization, lots of things there to dig in. And I look forward to hearing about those and what you've done going forward there, Chris. Chris, I want to thank you for coming on, sharing a bit of your journey and some of the best practices that you've learned along the way. I also want to make sure that people can learn more about you and your work and what you're up to. So what's the best place for them to go to?
Yeah, go to my website, chrisspurvey.com, CHRISSPURVEY.com. And you can subscribe to my newsletter. As a part of that, you can get an electronic copy of my book. And you're more than welcome, if you want a hard copy of my book, just to go to Amazon or Chapters here in Canada, and you can get my book. I'm probably, from a social network perspective, LinkedIn is my platform of choice. So check me out there. You can just search my name. I'm the only Chris Spurvey in the world, I think. I look forward to connecting with anybody who'd like to.
Fantastic. Well, we'll have all that linked up in the show notes. So just head over to consultingsuccess.com. You can type in Chris's name, Chris Spurvey, or just go over to the podcast page and you'll find the full transcript from today's show and everything else in terms of resources to connect directly with Chris. Chris, again, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.